Hello, thank you everyone for joining us for our office hours with the Unconference, the Housing California 2021 Unconference. My name is Jessica Hayes. I am with the Department of Housing and Community Development, and I'm working on the California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program. So here to take questions, provide feedback, a little bit of an overview about the program, and any other information folks are interested in finding out about the program. I'm going to apologize up front. I injured my back over the weekend, so I'm not running my camera today. It's a little tricky when you're taking your meetings from your bed, but I do appreciate everyone having the opportunity to join us and looking forward to taking some questions. I want to introduce Debbie Harper. Debbie Harper is working with us on this. Debbie, if you want to say hello.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Thank you for coming today. We look forward to answering your questions and giving you some information about this really important program.
So Debbie's going to be monitoring the chat for folks who want to put questions in the chat. Otherwise, if folks want to just go ahead and raise their hand, we can work that way as well. A little bit of an overview about the program, just to give folks a chance to get their questions together. So the California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program is the program that the state put together in response to the emergency rental assistance funding that was provided as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. So that was the act that was passed back in December that distributed to the statewide about $2.6 billion and allowed for jurisdictions to determine whether they wanted to set up a local program or run or participate with the state in the statewide program. The state legislation that supported the design of this program is SB 91. It's a piece of legislation that set up the parameters for how the California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program would work, but also provided some general guidance for how local programs also had the opportunity to work. And that legislation is currently in negotiation for a little bit of a revision. I think, as many of you know, the governor announced some potential changes to the program a few weeks back. And so we're looking to see how that's going to be changing over the next week or two. The overall structure of the SB 91 allows for 3 different ways for jurisdictions to set up their programs. So the big program is the state program. It manages about half of the state population. It includes some urban counties and all of the rural areas of the state. And it provides a centralized portal where folks can access the application through the Housing is Key website. The second option for jurisdictions to operate, who are jurisdictions operating their own program, is, we call this option B. These are partners or jurisdictions who had existing programs, pre-existing programs, and wanted to continue to operate those programs. They were already staffed up and they had the capacity and the technology already in place. And so they are running their local programs. This would be, Sacramento County, City of Sacramento, our option B, San Diego County, City of Los Angeles are some examples. And so these are folks who already had their programs up and running. And one of the things that's worth noticing as we're talking about the California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program is that the jurisdictions who are running these local programs are using the same set of rules and the same criteria as the large state program. And then we have a series of jurisdictions who are running very customized, specific, targeted programs. And they're using federal rules, federal regulations for those programs. And then because they are so targeted, generally using very narrow populations, the state provides an overlay program that provides support for the remaining folks who need assistance. So there are jurisdictions where there are 2 programs, and depending on what sort of assistance you are looking for, you either qualify for one or the other. And those are our option C jurisdictions. All of this can be accessed, though, through the Housing is Key website. And the Housing is Key website has what we're calling our no wrong door. So if folks are looking for assistance, they can go to the Housing is Key, hit apply. It will take you to a mapping tool. You can put your address into the mapping tool, and it will actually direct households and landlords who are interested in assistance it will direct them specifically to the program that is aligned with their jurisdiction. And whether that's the state program or one of the local programs, that no wrong door tool will work for them to get them to the right place to start their application. So there's a little bit of an overview of the infrastructure. If folks have questions, Debbie, if there's anything in the Q&A or the chat, I'd be happy to kind of take those as we go.
We have our first question. So it's about the student population. For example, a college student who is sharing housing with other students in a privately owned home where they all rented separate rooms and were all on the lease but paid one check to the landlord each month. If only one student out of 3 on the lease applied for COVID-19, how would it work? I heard in these situations they are being denied. Is there a way around this in situations where roommates are no longer in contact and can't guarantee the other roommates will apply for rent?
So that's actually a really great question, and it's one we've been working on. We call these this is a co-tenancy challenge. Under the way that SB 91 was originally written, we didn't have a good pathway for assisting households who had these co-tenancy challenges. The way that a household is eligible, or an applicant is eligible for assistance in the California COVID-19 rent relief program, is through household income, and household income is based on household size. So one of the earliest challenges we had with co-tenancy is, whether or not a household is everyone who lives in the unit, or a household, if a household can be described as a discrete individual or couple, or whoever that discrete family unit or individual unit is inside of that shared co-tenancy household. So we've been working on getting some clarity. One of the policies that we're working on resolving right now is how to assist households in co-tenancy where one of the co-tenants is eligible, the other is not, but those households work on completely independent incomes, right? So one thing that we're going to be looking for folks who are in a co-tenancy situation to provide is a very, very clear indicator that they are a unique household. The single check is not really an issue. It's more about identifying through either tax returns or through other documentation that this household is a discrete household. Some documentation of the agreement of the shared household costs. So some indicator of what costs are actually due by each household member. Some indicator that there have been rents that have been unpaid, so that the other household members have not covered the rents that were not paid by the household that has been impacted and unable to pay rents. And then for students, there's one additional criteria, and this one I think is going to be a little bit challenging, and that is whether or not students are a discrete household, which is to say they file their own taxes, or if they are part of their parents' household, which is to say they are declared as a dependent on their parents' taxes. If a student is declared as a dependent on their parents' taxes, then their parents' income is going to be part of the calculation. And that's going to be a challenge for, I think, a lot of students to show eligibility. If a student is not part of their parents' household, as in they are no longer declared as a dependent on their parents' income taxes, then it gets a little more straightforward in terms of declaring that student as an independent household. They just have to document that they are a discrete household. So making sure that you've got information to back this up is really, really important. And I will say, this is the policy that we're rolling out for the statewide program. This is something we're going to be working with our option B partners, so our local partners, to implement in their programs. And we'll discuss it with our option C partners to see if they are willing to implement this policy in their programs as well. So this is something that's rolling out kind of live as we're talking. It's not something that we had pre-planned. We had to do a lot of problem solving as we went in the deployment of this program.
Okay. Next question. Will COVID rent relief pay for sober living where rooms are shared?
So again, this is going to be based very much on the household and not so much on the housing type. Housing type is, you have a lot of different housing types when you're selecting your assistance. So, if the household is eligible and if the household has a rent agreement, and if the household has unpaid costs and those unpaid costs are documented and are owed to a landlord, then we have a lot of flexibility about what type of housing we assist. So my recommendation for folks who are curious, who feel like they have fallen behind in their arrears and they want to know whether or not they're eligible, submit an application. Put an application in. The way that we deal with a lot of these eligibility criteria issues as we get into kind of some of the more esoteric and some of the more rare challenges is we work through the policy based on the applications we've received. So if we receive applications, if we don't have a policy to determine them, we use those applications to define our policy. So if you aren't sure whether or not you're clearly eligible, submit an application. It absolutely does not hurt to submit an application. And we have simplified our application process to hopefully make it easier for folks to be able to get an application in. We've been getting feedback that many folks are able to submit an application in about half an hour. So it's not a huge time investment to potentially get a lot of assistance for unpaid rents.
Okay, next question. If you are currently receiving AFDS welfare, will this affect the amount of welfare or food stamps that you receive?
Great question. So the answer is no, it does not. This is not counted as income for tenants. So California rent relief is not counted as income for tenants. If your rent relief is paid directly to your landlord, it is counted as income for your landlord. So landlords do receive this as income, just as they would normal rent, right? But it is not counted as income for tenants. And to make things a little bit easier, folks who are on a public assistance program can use their recertification letter from that public assistance program to shortcut their application process. That public assistance letter can be counted as identity, as proof of residence, and as proof of income, and can be used to simplify your recertification process if you need ongoing assistance. So we strongly encourage folks who are receiving public assistance to participate in the program, and hopefully find it fairly straightforward to get your information into the system.
Okay, next question. How much of the rent relief provided has been moved to tenants and landlords, and is there a substantial amount left?
So what we're looking at right now, as we kind of look through our different asks, and remember, again, this is only about half of the state that is part of the state program, and I don't really have great data on the local programs. A lot of those you will need to kind of go to the local operators. So what I'm about to say does not apply to, like the city of Los Angeles or San Diego County or Sacramento County. But looking at the funds that have been requested, so we have a little over half a billion that has been requested. So it's 500 million plus that has been requested. In terms of what we're looking at obligated, we have obligated a little over 200 million. That means that an application has been processed through our first level of case management, but has not moved into the quality control process. And then once you apply the SB 91 percentages, payment percentages, which allows 80% of assistance if it goes directly to a landlord and 25% of assistance if it's actually going to a tenant, we have around 100 million that has been obligated. Some of the SB 91 changes that have been discussed are to move to 100% assistance, which is something we strongly encourage and fully support. We feel like that would be a real improvement to the program. And that would really put us back at that 200 million plus obligation, which we're looking to make payment on as quickly as possible.
And a follow up to that, there's a question about the timeframes for funding being distributed.
Yeah, so that's another great question, and that's one that we get quite a bit. So I think in order to understand sort of when payments are rolling out, when funds are being distributed, so far the state of California in our program, we have paid out over $50 million to households and to landlords, but our payments are not on our payment cycle, we pay weekly, but we're not paying on a first come, first served basis. So SB 91, the original legislation had specific priorities that were identified. And those priorities included households at or below 50% of the area median income for their county, and households who owed more than 75% of their rents in back rent, which put them at risk of eviction and did not render them the SB 91 eviction protections. So we were prioritizing those households as per the legislation. We have since opened up our priorities and have been paying on all of our priorities, but we've been focusing on paying our oldest applicants first. So we are paying, of course, we're maintaining our priorities for 50% of AMI or below, and for households who owe more than 75% in rents. And now we are also focusing on our oldest applications that don't meet those criteria, to make sure that we're paying down those oldest applications as also as a priority. But that means that, you know, the amount of time that households are waiting for assistance varies greatly depending on which priority class they fall into. So if we're talking about, you know, how long it takes to get a payment, it really varies depending on the priority class that an applicant fits into. But our goal is to disperse funds as quickly as possible. And we would like to get to a pretty quick turnaround into the program, especially if we can move to 100% assistance, which will simplify our process substantially.
Okay, so if this is the next question, so if the rent paid is current, what is the next step? The recipients, if the recipients need assistance?
So if a applicant needs assistance for current rents, or they know they're going to need assistance for the next month or the month after, they can go ahead and apply for what we call current and prospective rents, and they can put that information into the application. When you go into the California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program application through the Housing is Key website, you know, provided that you are eligible to apply to the state program and not a local program. It's a little bit different for the local programs. But in the state program, you put in the amount of assistance that you need for each month. And you can ask for up to 3 months in advance. So we just opened up July, August, and September for assistance for their rents. So you put down how much you think you're going to need for those next 3 months, and then we process that. As that application gets processed and processed for payment, payments are made. If you need assistance beyond those 3 months, after a certain amount of time, you will get an invitation to recertify, and then you can recertify and request additional assistance moving forward. A household can receive up to 12 months of assistance under our current funding, with an additional 3 months if they can document housing instability at the end of 12 months. So a total of 15 months of assistance. The next round of emergency rental assistance funds adds an additional 3 months, potential 3 months of assistance to that, although we have not yet deployed those funds. So we're operating inside the original emergency rental assistance funding stream.
Okay, looks like. Okay, here's a good question in the chat. If landlords agreed to the 80% repayment, 20% forgiveness, and the state makes the change to 100%, will those landlords automatically receive the 20%? Do they have to do anything, or will it just happen, and how quickly?
So our goal is to have it just happen. If we have the opportunity to do that top off, which means that that legislation gets passed, we would like to be able to just make payments and just notify folks that we are making payment and not have any additional inputs, recognizing that, you know, those applications have already all been reviewed. So we may do one additional round of quality control just to make sure that we're providing the correct amount. just to validate that we are providing the correct amount. And then we would be making payments, and I don't know that we would require any additional input from an applicant who has already been paid through the program.
Next question is, do you have accessible applications online?
So the availability of our applications online, we do have the application translated now. Unfortunately, it uses Google Translate, and that's due to some of the technological challenges with the way that the program is set up. But it is available in, I believe, 7 languages online. We have added a paper application for households who do not have access to the internet. So that paper application can be printed and provided, and then it has to be provided back to a partner to be uploaded. We're working on getting that application professionally translated, as it correlates very, very closely with the online application. It can be used to support folks who are doing the online application in one of the Google Translate languages, in the event that Google Translate has some of its challenges that it often has when it's doing translations. We also have what we're calling our local partner network, and our local partner network is made up of service providers and partners across the statewide program who can assist households in completing an application. They can also assist landlords, for the record, if a landlord needs a little bit of help providing an application. And our local partner network can assist through several different ways. And Debbie, if you want to go ahead and put the phone number to the local partner network appointment center in the chat, that would be really, really helpful. But the local partner network can take appointments and provide on the phone assistance. So, if you've got the technology in hand, you just need a little bit of guidance in doing your application, they can provide phone appointments to assist. If you want to go to one of their offices and use their equipment, they can help, help put together your application, help upload your application. They'll make an appointment for you to come in. They will also do house calls where they will go to you to help set up a time with you to do your application. And they can help households who do not have an email address, so they can help you set up an email address. We also added in the application the option for a tenant to make a designated representative, to designate someone to complete the application and check in on the application on their behalf. So, they can also be your designated representative, or you can have another family member or another person be your designated representative. But that's another option for someone to be able to check in on your application. So we, if folks have any special needs or need any additional accessibility options, the local partners are set up to address those and can be very, very helpful in making sure that folks have access to all of the information necessary to complete the application. Part of the reason we streamlined the application was to improve that accessibility. So we're always looking for feedback on how we can continue to make this an easier and better process for folks who need assistance.
Okay, next question. Many landlord applicants are affordable housing nonprofits with multiple properties that are all income restricted and are often serving the lowest AMIs. Is it possible to get a case manager assigned to us as a landlord as opposed to one assigned to each individual tenant?
So this is another great question. So this week, I'm actually working on revising our landlord application. We revised our tenant application, as I mentioned, to simplify it. We're working on making some changes to our landlord application to address some of the feedback that we've gotten about how landlords can utilize the application. And one of the things that we're looking to add is a mechanism by which landlords who run these types of affordable housing projects can identify themselves, and how we can potentially leverage the information provided in that landlord application to further simplify what the tenants are required to submit. So this is something we're currently pursuing. We have some technological limitations about requiring that there is a tenant app. The federal legislation does tie eligibility for funding to the tenant household. And so since it is tied to the tenant household, we have to have some sort of tenant some sort of tenant presence in the application process. But our goal is to, between adding that ability for a tenant to do a designee or representative, and then adding some potential opportunities for landlords to provide additional data, that we can simplify that process even farther, and maybe even allow for a landlord with tenant, some sort of documented tenant consent to be able to complete the tenant application as well for households who are in those assisted or subsidized properties. So we're looking to make that improvement, and we will be rolling that out over the next 2 weeks, and we'll let folks know what that's going to look like and what the and how to interface with that as soon as we get that up and running. And we're working with a couple of nonprofit housing providers to test this, so that we can make sure that this will work as effectively as it can inside of our technological framework.
Okay, next question. Can prior tenants apply to have their COVID-related balances paid?
So under the current SB 91, you must currently live in the unit that you are requesting assistance for in order to be eligible for assistance. One of the proposed changes that we are hoping to see added to the legislation is an opportunity to request assistance for a unit where a household has self-evicted, right? They've realized they're not going to be able to pay rents, or they've had other reasons that they needed to leave the unit, but they do owe back rent. So that's a function that we're hoping to be made available. It's not currently eligible under the structure, but if folks go into the application, you're going to notice that there is a drop down in housing type that allows you to identify whether or not you have self-evicted, that you are no longer in the unit. And through that process, we're hoping to be able to capture those households. If we're unable to assist through changes in SB 91, we'll be looking for other ways to potentially work with those households. So we do encourage folks who are looking for assistance to go ahead and apply. Our hope is that the changes to SB 91 will resolve this issue and will allow us to provide assistance for households who have accumulated rental debt in units where they are no longer residing.
So there's a follow-up question to our landlord answer. Will a new mechanism you just described be able to will be available to landlords who have already applied? And also they, I think as the landlords can help bring applicants to the table to do their part of the application.
So landlords absolutely can bring tenants to the table to help them do their part of the application. We've had conversations with landlords who've set up kiosks in their office space where they're using office Wi-Fi, and have even used some of their office equipment to support tenants who need to copy documents or provide information. So we're definitely encouraging landlords to communicate with their tenants and cooperate in preparing the application. Regarding applications that have already been completed, so there will be changes that will be available, but once an application has been submitted, it takes an administrative action on our part to reopen it. That's not an impossible thing, but it may or may not be worthwhile. It may not be worth the extra effort depending on where your application is in processing. So that's something that we would want to look at on a case-by-case basis to see whether or not there was any benefit to reopening. A lot of these applications are already quite a ways through our process. And if the tenant part has been completed, it may not be worth it to reopen it. It may just add time to the processing. If the tenant part has not been completed, or if the tenant has initiated but has not finished, then that might be something where we would want to reopen that application and allow the landlord the additional flexibility to provide information on behalf of the tenant.
Okay, how do you keep landlords honest during COVID?
How do we keep anyone honest? We have several fraud, and I'm not going to go into a ton of detail because I don't want to tell the fraudsters how to circumvent our fraud protections, but we have several layers of fraud protection on our program. And I think what's worth knowing is a little bit of what we did during the design phase. So we had a team of auditors from the state controller's office sit with us through to the design and the implementation of our program, and work with us to identify any opportunity for fraud or misuse or abuse in our program. So we've worked really hard to build in fraud protections and fraud preventions, not just in our application and our technology, but also in our case management and our file review process. And we have, successfully navigated several instances where folks who, who had received money previously were asking for money a second time around, or who had applied to multiple programs, whether intentionally or unintentionally. We've been able to identify that and prevent that. There's no way to make any system or any program totally fraud proof, but we're working very hard and very much staying current with what other states and other large jurisdictions are doing in the administration of their programs to make sure we're staying on the best practice edge of fraud prevention.
Okay, there is a question. Could you elaborate on the local partner application assistance services and contacts for those services in a given area? Their understanding is that they're only really funded for option A jurisdictions.
That is correct. That is a correct understanding that the local partner network does really function for option A. And then it's also available for option C, where the state is providing application overlay. So if we're providing programmatic overlay in an option C jurisdiction, the local partner network has some access and some staff there as well. Option B jurisdictions are really running their own program, and they have their own partners and their own providers that they are collaborating with. And then option C jurisdictions who are working with targeted populations, they have their own providers and their own work. So it's a little bit of a patchwork when you're looking for assistance. If you're looking for resources in option A, you can find that through our Housing is Key website. But if you are option B or option C, you may need to navigate your local program site or your local program options before coming to the state. We are happy to answer questions, though. If folks are having a hard time finding something, you can submit a question or to our call center or to the Housing through the Housing is Key website, and we can help navigate some of that if folks are having a hard time finding the appropriate local program.
Okay. Is there any data where California has provided the most relief and requested and funded to, sorry, messed this question up. Do we have data on where California has provided the most relief, both requested and distributed?
So I think I'm going to do a little bit of interpretation on this question. This sounds like a question about where we have been distributing funds out of the California COVID-19 rent relief program. So I'm going to, very straightforwardly, the funds go to where the demand is, where the demand has come from the state of California. We in the option A program, we include LA County. We also include Ventura County, the city of Oxnard. We have Contra Costa County, San Mateo County. All are very large urban counties that have substantial populations. We include also San Luis Obispo and Santa Cruz counties, Tulare County, and Yolo County as well, and Butte County also. But those counties have a more dispersed population. So, if you're talking about purely the amount of money and where it's gone to where the people are. So LA County, Ventura County, Contra Costa, and San Mateo is really where the bulk of our applications. But the funds are set aside in reservation pools, which means that funding is available and set aside for all of the counties participating in the option A state program. So there is funding available for everyone who is participating in the program. We have plenty of funds available. We strongly encourage folks to apply. We're very interested in taking as many applications as possible. And if you're curious as to whether or not you're eligible, go ahead and apply. But, when you're looking at the distribution of funds, they are going to go to where the folks in need are. And that would be, lower income renters who have been unable to pay rent due to COVID.
Okay, and next question, how do we receive updates on the new guidance and changes to the program?
So if you are a option B jurisdiction who is running a local program, we have an option B office hours. We actually have one scheduled this week. And so we provide feedback to our option B jurisdictions. A lot of that is best practices, some experience sharing. We talk about potential changes to legislation and any updates to what's been provided from the US Treasury to help make sure that we're all kind of coordinating and really maximizing our experience, taking best practices. So we communicate very regularly with our option B partners with any changes. We have a guidance document that was put together in February that we're going to be updating with any changes to SB 91 that come out in the next couple of weeks. So once that is updated, that will be available on the HCD website. Our option A jurisdictions coordinate with us in an advisory committee. So any changes to the legislation or any programmatic changes are communicated to them through the advisory committee meetings that we hold. We also send out regular update emails. And then for a lot of our jurisdictions, we have either weekly or bi-weekly meetings where we coordinate with them to talk about what's happening in their local jurisdiction and what changes are happening, what they're hearing, kind of boots on the ground, to make sure that we're taking in a good feedback loop and can make sure that we make adjustments as necessary to not just how we're deploying the program, but our local partner network or any other distribution of information, advertising, materials, and whatnot that needs to be available for that region or that area.
Okay, next question. What marketing is being done to reach lower income renters?
So I'm going to just upfront, this is where I am weakest in this program. I am very, very much involved in the programmatic structure, but we have a very dedicated, very accomplished marketing team that does a lot of the advertising and outreach. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I know is going on, but I'm going to just say it's the tip of the iceberg because they are working furiously to get information out. So they've been doing very concentrated campaigns through targeted media. That's included some radio ads, a lot of newspaper and publication buys. They've done an extensive social media outreach to help engage with folks for whom they get a lot of their information in the social media, and that's Twitter and Facebook and Instagram for sure. They've been doing some static media buys, so that would be park benches, or the bus benches, and then billboards and other information like that. They've been doing some gasoline toppers in targeted neighborhoods. So, where you go to the gas station and it starts auto-playing messages to you while you're pumping your gas. So there's been some of that information as well. We have a lot of videos that have been presented. We've been doing a lot of outreach with different news stations and different media providers. So, we have press conferences almost weekly, interviews more than weekly. So we're very regularly communicating with folks in that way. And then we're doing also regionally targeted outreach. So periodically we do regionally targeted outreach to help make sure that we're paying attention to the regional nuances of the state of California because it is an incredibly diverse state. And we want to make sure that we don't miss opportunities for folks to be able to engage in the program. So we're about to embark on another one of those kind of larger media outreach events, and that's going to be coordinated with any changes to SB 91 to make sure that we get that information out to folks. So, and then there's way more than that they've been doing, but that's sort of the high level overview.
This question just came in. Is there a plan to simplify the application for residents? The length and complexity is extremely difficult to navigate for our residents.
So I would ask if you've checked the application in the last couple of weeks. We went in and did an extensive simplification and reorganization of the application to make it a lot easier, hopefully a lot easier for folks. We tried very hard to remove any jargon or complicated language, really to distill down to what households need. We restructured the application to make it easier to follow by flow. So, it has almost a narrative now to it where, you provide your applicant information and then you talk about rents and utilities that are due, and then household and then income information. We've also gone in and created a bunch of tiered questions so that you're only answering questions if they apply to you specifically. So folks who are using, for instance, their tax return as their income documentation don't have to go through questions about proof of identity, for example. They can use their tax return as their identity, so they don't even have to access any of that information. So we've done a lot of that tiering. We've also simplified the documentation process, so folks can use one piece of paper, one piece of document, one record to document multiple things. So, if a household is asking, for example, for utility assistance and is using one of our, either your tax return or a public assistance recertification letter, that may be all of the documentation they need to provide, right? Especially if their landlord is participating. So we've really tried to streamline it. So I would recommend folks who, if you haven't gone in and attempted the application in the last couple of weeks, go ahead and give it a try and see if it is easier to navigate, easier to work through, because we did hear that it was complicated and time consuming. And we really want to make sure that we're responsive to that to make sure as many folks as possible can access it.
That is all. Oh, here came another one. I noticed the application may be in different languages, but the links to forms needed to apply are English forms. Is there a way to have the application linked to forms that are translated in respective languages?
So I think that might be an older version of the application. The newer application does not have any linked forms. We were able to remove all of the linked form requirements. So all of the certifications, all of the verifications that were required earlier are actually in the application, because we did hear that the linked forms were a challenge, and because we can't have just technical limitations, we can only have one link. So one of our responses was just to remove that as a requirement. So I'd recommend folks to get back in and see if they're still experiencing that particular obstacle, because hopefully we've been able to fully remove that as a challenge.
I know you answered this, but it's come into the question again. What's the average turnaround time from applicant submission to review, approval, issuance of funds?
So the turnaround time really is dependent on whether or not that applicant meets one of our priority criteria. Applicants that do meet priority criteria are being processed more quickly than applicants that do not, although we are processing everyone. So we're processing as many as we can each week, but we are focused on our priority criteria. So your turnaround time is very much dependent on where you fit. As of right now, our priority criteria it looks kind of like this. We're working through our households who are at 50% or AMI and below. So that is one of our priorities. Another kind of co-priority is households who owe more than 75% of their rents in arrears, which means they are vulnerable to eviction because they don't necessarily have coverage of the eviction protections. And then the third priority is applicants that submitted very early on in the process. They don't meet those other priorities, but they've been sitting in our queue for a while. So it's our oldest applications. So those are what we're working through right now as quickly as possible. If you think as a household or, as a service provider, the households that you're assisting meet those priorities, I strongly recommend getting an application in as quickly as possible. We want to work through as many of them as we can. And again, this is only for the state program. So if you are operating with a local program, or if you are eligible for a local program, the turnaround times are very much going to be dependent on how that local program is structured. And I know some of them have a lot of capacity and have been able to process very quickly and have done a really fantastic job. And I know some of them have a little bit more of a challenge working through the application volume. So it can be a little bit more difficult.
We have no more questions.
All right. So we can give folks a minute and just talk a little bit about, what we're seeing, kind of next steps for the program. We're very excited about, SB 91 revisions that we're hoping that will come out very soon. Our goal is to have a running head start at implementing those changes. So as I've mentioned already, we've made some adjustments in some of our information to be able to make changes as they become options for us. So we're very much looking forward to that. We're working on another large scale outreach and marketing effort. We're also doing a lot of coordination with the Judicial Council and the courts to help create what I'm calling eviction intervention plans, to help make sure that we've got opportunities for folks to get assistance before eviction becomes a threat or becomes a challenge. So we're working to get some of that set up as quickly as we can. We're also very open to any, additional information folks think that would be helpful for the program. So if you've got feedback on our application, feedback on our call center, feedback on our process, we absolutely want to hear that. It helps us think about what we need to do to continue to improve the program, because we really are very dedicated to getting this funding out to as many folks as we can. We want to make sure that households are able to stay housed and really provide them with the support they need to survive the impacts of COVID-19. And I think if that's it, we can probably give folks a few minutes of their day back, and they can, go grab something to eat before the next session. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.